Oh, that's the side that comes out. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It is so good to have you here with me. So, it's Friday. We got our base map from Surgeline last night, which means we're installing our parts. We're installing all the parts, actually. But I'm gonna break this video up into a four segmented one, so that way if someone's looking for one of these installs, I don't have to scan through a video that's entirely way too long, because I could easily make this an hour and a half, 2 hour video installing all these parts in depth, so that way you can do it just like I do. So, we also got another thing in the mail. We got our Killer Bee oil pan, windage tray, and pickup, and all the associated hardware. So, I'm excited to get that in. That'll be an install for next weekend or later this weekend if I have time. But we're gonna get as much installed as we can. So, we're gonna grab the injectors, head out to the garage, and start pulling the old ones out and putting the new ones in. I've never installed injectors before, so hopefully we can figure this out. So if this video never makes it to the internet, I never figured it out, but if it makes it, we got it. Bam, we're in the garage. So the first thing you want to do when you're installing injectors is clear the fuel line, or the fuel pressure, out of the lines and out of the injectors themselves. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hop into the fuse panel. We're gonna pull out the fuse for the fuel pump. We're gonna start the car, let it run until it dies, and I'm gonna try to start it again to clear out any more of that pressure that might be in the lines, and that's gonna clear all the fuel out. So we're gonna move. So we're gonna go jump over to the fuse panel, pull that fuse, and then start the car. Your fuel pump fuse is gonna be in your fuse panel located up in the engine bay. So pulling that guy off. There's a small diagram on the inside. I already know which one the fuel pump fuse is. It's gonna be this 15 right up here in the front. So with these little clamp guys, we're gonna go ahead and pull it out. Bam. Put it in there. I'm gonna set this on the workbench so that way I don't lose it. And then we're gonna start the car to clear the fuel pressure out of the lines. All the fuel pressure's out of the lines. As you see, the car just died twice, which is what we wanted. So there's no more fuel pressure going on in the engine bay. With that, we're gonna start pulling out the injectors. So I'm gonna run through do one side so I have a little bit of aspect of what I'm actually doing and talking to you guys about, and then we're gonna walk through the other side. So I'm gonna get going on the passenger side, and then we'll jump over to the driver's side. All right, so I just ran through and I did the driver's side just so I had an understanding, and this is actually extremely simple to do, and I was stressing about this for no reason. So we're gonna walk through on the passenger side step by step on how to do this. So the first thing we're gonna do is take up the intake tract, the air box, and the intake, so we have access to our injectors down here. So I'm gonna get through, pull all these off. Depending on what intake you have, if you installed it, you should know how to put it on. If not, look up the manufacturer's specs on how to install it and just do the reverse of that. So we're gonna get the Cobb SF box pulled out. We're not gonna end up putting this back in either. Since I have the ETS front mount that we're gonna be installing, it just won't work for this. So we're gonna get this stuff taken out and get digging into these injectors here. All right, with our intake system box out of the way, we can start getting into the injectors over here. So I'm gonna move the camera to a better position to see what I'm doing, and then we're gonna start digging around down here. This looks a little bit different than what we just did on the other side, but overall, we got this. All right, so we're running through this, and there's 3 bolts that you need to take off to get this shield off. One of them is right down there. If I can get that light down there. Right down there. You see that guy right there? That's one bolt. We have another bolt. Jesus. We have another bolt right here on the coolant tank expansion reservoir that holds this guy on. And then there's one more. We've got one more bolt right there. So if you're looking at the top of the coolant expansion reservoir, right down off of that nipple, going down here. So we're gonna get those 3 bolts off, so that way we can get this shield out of the way. There's also a little clip back here that we're just gonna pop out that there's some wiring harness on. So we're gonna get those clipped off, or we're gonna get those unscrewed so we can get to this. Your fuel rail is right here, and your injectors sit right underneath of it. So we're gonna get this off, get to that fuel rail, and get those injectors out. Now that we've got those couple bolts that I showed you pulled out, we need to take out the TGV motor, which sits right under the turbo inlet. So to do so, there's two 10mm bolts, one on the top and one on the bottom, and I'm gonna be honest, it's awful to take these two out. I'm using a 1/4" ratchet with a wobbly do and a long 10mm. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull these out and then get this motor off. There's one electrical connector here and then the two 10mm bolts. So we're gonna get this off and get that one last bolt that's holding this bracket onto the fuel rails. So there's our TGV motor. So that gives us access to the last 12mm bolt that we need, right? Oh, please don't fall in the inch bay. Woo, these are awful. So with the TGV motor out, we're gonna go ahead and get access to that last 12mm bolt so we can take off this cover. So I'm gonna get that pulled off and we're gonna keep going through. All right guys, so here's kind of the shitty part. This bolt down here that goes along this fuel bracket can't come out because of that fuel line unless you take this banjo bolt off. I don't want to take that banjo bolt off for the oil because I don't have another gasket for that. So I think this is enough room to manage here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and unbolt those two bolts for that fuel rail right there and then start to get this guy out. So I'm going to play with this a little bit and see the easiest way to pull it out. So we'll find out here shortly. I apologize for all the funny camera angles, but it's a little difficult to film getting like down in these crevices. So, I mean, I can move this guy around a little bit. So maybe I can maneuver it. We'll find out. Just gonna take out this banjo bolt for the oil right here. This is 17mm. So I don't know what's gonna happen, so we're gonna find out. Tell you it's fucking torqued down though. Actually, it's not that torqued down. I'm pretty sure this is just an oil feed for this side of the head. So we're gonna find out. I see oil. I see banjo bolt. So there's our banjo bolt. Crush washer is still on it. Don't lose it. Don't lose the other crush washer either. Yes, that bolt is not going back in. I'll tell you that right now. But with that, we can now take out this bracket. And I'm gonna put that banjo bolt back in. God, dude, that was fucking awful. That was actually awful to do. So I'm gonna grab the camera and I'll show you what we just did. But now we have access to our injector. Oh, geez, I gotta be careful with that. So we have access to our injectors now, which is nice. It's actually very nice. So I'm gonna grab the camera, I'm gonna show you what we're about to do, and then I'm gonna do it. So we just took out this banjo bolt here, which runs down under the turbo inlet. So right here is where that 12mm was. That was giving us an issue. So as you can see, as the 12mm was coming out, it was pushing against this oil feed line. So we took out the banjo bolt, we grabbed this and we moved it over a little bit. So that gave us access to be able to move that fuel line right there. And with that, we were able to get the cover out, as you can see. So we took the TGV motor off. We undid the banjo bolt so we can move this. I replaced the crush washer. I have more. I'm not putting that bolt back in down there. I don't see a point in it. This is the plug for the TGV motor. We're going to go ahead and unplug this guy here. There's one of our injectors there. I already unplugged that one and I put the cord up here. And then our other injector is on the other side right down there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that injector unplugged. There's these two 12mm bolts right here, one there, one there. We're going to get those undone, and with those undone, we're going to be able to pull out the fuel rail with the injectors. Now keep in mind, when you're pulling these out, you're going to have some fuel that's going to leak, so make sure you have a couple rags ready to soak up that fuel and just put the fuel rags wherever you need them. So I'm going to go ahead, start pulling the fuel rails out, get that other guy unplugged, and then get those injectors out, and then we'll take a look at the STI Blues versus the Cobb 1050s. There's no fuel dripping on this side, so that's good. So we're gonna get these injectors pulled right out. Oh God, I lied, it's leaking. Oh boy. So there's one. Don't forget to grab the inner seals, also these little donut gaskets. So don't forget to pull those out. Those are gonna still be in your TGVs. Don't leave those in there. much better. So, while the fuel rails are draining, we're gonna take a look at the factory injectors. So, here's a Subaru Blue injector. It is tiny. It is teeny tiny, teeny tiny. We're gonna open up one of these Cobb ones here, which I still think are rebranded ID 1050s. So, with the Cobb injector, you can see that it uses these little bushing dealios to hold it in place, where the 1050s, they have a spring, an O-ring, and an O-ring on the bottom. So when we're taking out the old ones, you're gonna have one of these O-rings on the bottom that sit to hold the injector in place. So size comparison wise, we don't need that anymore, because as you can see, these ones are a lot more beefy and we don't need it to hold in place like this one did. So these ones don't need any support. So the spray patterns on these, the 1050, it's difficult to put, there we go. It's much bigger on this one compared to the factory Subaru one. So you can kind of see the difference between them. So with that, it's been about 10 minutes. We're gonna go ahead and get these ones thrown in the car now and set these ones in a bag. If anyone needs some STI blues, I think these are 700cc, 650cc, I'm not sure. But if you need them, 20,000 miles, throw me an offer. I have no use for these. So we're gonna hop back over to the car, get these ones in the car, and start reassembling everything. Take a flashlight here and look inside of the TGVs to make sure that none of those seals are still in there, which there is in the back one. So I have a small Allen key that I've been using because I don't have a pick. And we're just gonna grab that seal, pull it out. We don't need that anymore. So I'm gonna go set that on the bench with the rest of the factory ones, and then we're gonna get the Cobbs thrown in. Ready to go. And we've got our pigtail adapter. So we're gonna go ahead and plug in the pigtail adapters first, because I found that plugging them in second is quite annoying. So got that guy plugged all the way in. He's clipped in, not going anywhere. We're gonna go ahead and get these slid in. So you want the plugs coming out off to the side, and you're gonna want to seat the injector in there as deep as you can. Let me get the back injector in first. So this front injector is gonna be a little annoying to get in, just because I can't lift up on the fuel rail too much. So we're gonna go ahead and get that slid in as far as we can to start with. Now we're gonna seat the fuel rail over the injectors. Like so. So now we've got the injectors seated in. We've got the harnesses coming out on both sides to the way they need to go. So we're gonna go ahead and throw those two 12mm bolts back in that hold the fuel rail to the TGVs, which I don't remember which bolts those are. Don't be like me and organize your bolts. So these two 12mm, camera doesn't want to focus on them. Two 12mm, they are the only two that match. So we're gonna go ahead and get those slid in, get them started to be threaded in. There's one. There's the passenger side. There's the bolts threaded into the TGV for the fuel rail. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten them down. They are the 12mm. Fuel rail tightened down. We're gonna go ahead and start plugging everything back in. So we have this one blue connector down here that's gonna plug right down to this EVAP sensor. This oil pressure sensor, I'm not quite sure what it is. It's a sensor or something. So that guy. We're gonna go ahead and plug in our injector. So go ahead and plug in that adapter that we had into the injector. Got one. And now to find the other guy. There's a lot of plugs down here, boy. Oh, I've got 3 unplugged plugs. Interesting. Alright, so that's going to go all the way. So the 3-prong connector, there's one connector underneath the injector. That one's going to go there. And then the injector is the 2-prong. So go ahead and plug those 2 in. Get those 2 plugged in. Push that down there. So we've got everything plugged back in down by the fuel rails. Now we're gonna go ahead and get that stupid bracket back in here. So this bracket's gonna sit in like this with the stud facing outwards. So you're gonna have to finagle this in. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you, and it sucks. So, it's crooked, but it's not. So we have one bolt up here holding down this bracket for these hoses, one on the back side that holds this guy down, a 12mm bolt going down this ledge to the bracket, the front bolt up here, and then two on the back side. So we're gonna get going, putting all these guys back in to get this bracket held down. We need to put the TGV back on. So with that, we're going to swing it down here, slide it over the TGV, get it lined back up, and then put the two 10mm bolts back in. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw these bad boys back in and get to cracking. That sucked. So I'm not gonna lie, that sucked. The passenger side is definitely more difficult than the driver's side, so I was backwards, which sucks. Jeez. So I'm gonna throw the battery in the car and we're gonna test to see if there's any leaks over here from the injectors. So I'm gonna throw the battery in, put the fuel pump fuse back in, and then turn it on, and we'll see if we're leaking. If we are, I hate myself if we're leaking. We've got the battery hooked back up, the fuel pump fuse back in. I'm gonna start the car and see if there's any leaks over here. I lied, we're not starting the car, we're just priming the fuel pump, because if the injectors are gonna leak, they're gonna leak now. I don't see any. No leaks. I can definitely hear them. No leaks. Sweet. Alright guys, that is the end of this video of the injector install. I hope this helped you a little bit. I mean, it's still not incredibly in-depth as I wanted it to be, but it's so difficult by yourself to get a camera down in there when you're doing this. But we got them in. The driver's side is a lot easier than the passenger side, but it's going to be the same process when you're going through both sides. So we have no leaks. We have the 1050cc's installed. I'm about to install the intercooler next, so that'll be the next video. But yeah, if you got any questions or comments about any of the tools I used going through this, drop a comment below. If you like the page and you like what we do, give me a sub, like the video. If not, I'll see you in the next one.